Hello, this is Stephen Nojiri, and this is another Tada Genji Tradition video. This video is actually going to look at the differences between the Tada Genji and the quote-unquote Oe Genji. Now, in my previous videos, I have referenced the quote-unquote Oe Genji, but I need to actually clarify a major point. I've actually been a little lazy here, and I should apologize because I know it's not clear, and that lack of clarity is one of the reasons for this video. So, let's clarify this. When I say that the Oe Genji, I'm not actually referring to a branch of the Genji called the Oe. I'm actually referring to a group of Genji trained by a family that is named Oe. So, the Oe family is not a Genji family. The Oe are an older family associated with the imperial court. However, they become the holders of a lot of military traditions, and they are actually the overseers of a lot of the military manuals during the 900s. And they also are responsible for training a lot of the Genji lines in the early days, like the 900s, late 800s, 900s. So when I say Oe Genji, what I really mean is Oe-Trained Genji. So again, this is a point to make clear. The Oe family is a court family associated with the military teachings and trainings. They are not Genji, but they train a bunch of Genji. And the Genji that they train are what we call Oe Genji or Oe-Trained Genji. And eventually, as the videos progress and the material sort of loops back around and starts to go deeper, and as we go deeper with the topics, I will actually start to use the correct and specific lines of Genji. But so far, this is all introduction to the material, so this is sort of the procedure to help you understand. But now we're to the point where you need to understand that the Oe Genji is a type of Genji trained by the Oe family. So hopefully that makes sense. But you may have the question, wait, aren't the Tada Genji also trained by the Oe Genji? So why would we what's the difference? So let's get into that. The Tada Genji absolutely received a good amount of training and teaching from the Oe family. But there's still the distinction between the Tada Genji and the Oe Genji, or Oe-Trained Genji. So let's just take a moment to explain those Genji lines, and this will make just a bit more sense. So, Tada Manju, aka Genji Mitsunaka, he has multiple sons, but the two most important ones, the ones that we're tracking here, is Genji Yorimitsu and Genji Yorinobu. Now, the Tada Genji are the descendants of Genji Yorimitsu. The Genji Yorinobu line gives us the Kawachi Genji. So does that make sense? Tada Manju has two sons. Genji, or he has multiple sons, but these are the two we're tracking. The Tada Genji are the line from Genji Yorimitsu. The line from Genji Yorinobu, the other important brother, is the Kawachi Genji. So this is a distinction you need to learn, because the Tada Genji is that one line from Yorimitsu, Kawachi from Yorinobu. Now, when I say Oe Genji or Oe-Trained Genji, what I'm referring to is Genji Yorinobu's line. So what we're referring to is the Kawachi Genji. So from this point on, when we say like the Oe Genji or Oe-Trained Genji, this is the Kawachi Genji. And again, they start with Tada Manju, but they become distinctly their own line. Now, you may recognize it, you the viewer might recognize the Kawachi Genji, maybe you not. If you don't, this is where Genji Yorie comes from, Genji Yoritomo comes from, and the Genji Yoshitsune comes from, this Kawachi Genji line. And while it is historically documented that there were several crossovers between the Kawachi Genji and the Tada Genji, again, they are distinct lines. even though, again, one of those crossovers is the Tada Genji serving Genji Yoshitsune during the Genpei War. And this actually leads to a lot of crossover in the tradition. But technically, they're still separate lines. Genji Yoshitsune and a bunch of Tada Genji serving hand in hand, a lot of traditions going back and forth. But Genji Yoshitsune is still technically Kawachi Genji. So now you understand the difference between the actual line genealogy, like the Tada Genji and the Kawachi Genji, right? But there's also an ideological difference here. So this goes back to the Tada Genji training with the Oe family, but not agreeing with everything the Oe family was teaching. So let's look for a moment at what the Oe family was teaching. So and what we'll do is, because they were known for teaching, they were also known for codifying a lot of things into text. So they produced 3 texts, which are very well known. Unfortunately, they are mostly lost. As we go through the list, we'll talk about that. So there's the Kinetsushu. Now, the original of the Kinetsushu is lost. A lot of you viewers have probably heard of this before. The Kinetsushu, the great Kinetsushu. So many Genji descended families claim to have a copy, but unfortunately everybody has different copies. Over the centuries, every family made their own variations and their own versions, and so it's really impossible to know what the original Kinetsushu was. All we know is that there was an original, but now there's dozens and dozens of very different versions. There is also a document that is called the Tora no Maki, the Tiger Scroll, aka also known as Hijitsu Ikansho. Now, that was its original. Hijitsu Ikansho is its original name. Tora no Maki is a name that it was given, like a nickname that it was given much later on. And what it is, it's 42 magical techniques that have been passed down. So the Oe family had these 42 particular spells / rituals, and the document is those 42 passed down. The document is also sometimes called just the 42 articles, but it's 42 spells. The whole thing is magic. It's 42 magic spells. But again, like the Kinetsushu, over time, multiple versions come into existence. It's really difficult. You can tell which ones are older and which ones are newer, but it's still kind of impossible to really say like what's the original version. There's a couple of contenders that have a good plausibility of being the oldest versions, but the original is probably lost. Just like the Kinetsushu, the original is probably lost. And the third thing that they're known for is a document called the Tosenkyo, and most of the Tosenkyo is interesting because we don't have the full Tosenkyo anymore, but the pieces that we have are pretty much understood. We can pretty much think that that's close to the original, right? So if you can imagine that we have like maybe 40% of what is either the original or super close to the original, but we don't have the full original. And the Tosenkyo is an interesting text because it's a teaching on war philosophy and war strategy that's actually very I'm not going to say very anti-Chinese, but it is very critical of the Chinese approach. In fact, it even goes so far as to say that if you study the Sun Tzu, if you study the art of war, you will train yourself to be a coward. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in the next slides. So based on everything that I just said, you can kind of get this idea. The Oe family actually taught a lot of magic and a lot of this like this worldview or this view of warfare, that warfare is won by faith and by bravery, not by strategic planning and building of infrastructure. So what you have here is almost like a pre-modern tribalistic view of warfare, where warfare is literally about, how in touch with the gods you are and how brave you are determines your victory, versus a state-based view of warfare in which victory comes about through, infrastructure and strategy, strategic planning, things like that, etc., etc., etc. So because the Chinese classics like Sun Tzu's Six Secret Teachings are telling warriors that they need to plan, plot, strategize, and the Oe family is really coming from this sort of pre-modern or just pre-state tribal view where warfare is determined by who's got the strongest spirit. They clash, and the Oe family says that the Japanese warriors should put their faith and attention to deity practices and magical spells and bravery, and not on strategic planning, because they say strategic planning will train you to be weak-spirited and train you to be a coward, etc., etc., etc. So this is this is the key difference between Oe-Trained Genji and the Tada Genji, because to be blunt, just come straight out and say it, the Tada Genji, while they took on a lot of the Oe Genji material, the Tada Genji reject the anti-Chinese ideas. The Tada Genji actually doubled down on Sun Tzu. They doubled down on the secret teachings. They doubled down on espionage. The Tada Genji really like and accept and just take on the concept of strategic planning and espionage and fighting warfare as a state, not as a sort of magical shamanistic warrior. Now, to be completely honest and fair, let's not get this clouded, let's keep this historically accurate. Many of the Oe-Trained Genji eventually do take a positive stance to the Chinese classics. So we're looking at the Oe family's initial teaching and the Tada Genji's initial rejection of that part of it, and the Tada Genji's acceptance of the Chinese methods. And then over time, these Oe-Trained Genji, like the Kawachi Genji, they eventually over time, they start to accept they start to integrate the Chinese methods more and more and more. For example, Genji Yoshitsune he greatly cherished the Six Secret Teachings, right? That's kind of something a lot of the viewers may know. Genji Yoshitsune, real big on the Six Secret Teachings. But this is a key difference still within the Oe-Trained Genji. So Oe-Trained Genji start like hard with Oe viewpoint, and then it changes over time. Whereas the Tada Genji, they are like very taken to the Chinese ideas from the beginning. So the transition period for the Tada Genji, there really isn't one, because from the beginning they are liking the Chinese stuff, whereas other Genji lines have to, like, over time start liking the Chinese stuff. But this all may have come at a great cost, because again, timing is a huge portion of, I would say, timing is one of the secrets of luck, right? So luck's the secret ingredient to luck is timing, right? I don't know if that's kind of something that people say, but we know that Genji Yoritomo, who's a Kawachi Genji, it's well known that he destroys the Genji Yoshitsune. Genji Yoshitsune is like the hero of the Genpei War, and then he's crushed by Yoritomo soon afterwards. And Yoritomo's justification for crushing Yoshitsune is that Yoshitsune is untrustworthy. Yoshitsune is a war criminal. Yoshitsune used a lot of dirty tactics during the war, and he can't be forgiven for being so dirty and so untrustworthy, right? Well, Genji Yoritomo used that exact same line against the Tada Genji, right? He says the Tada Genji they're too devious, they're too manipulative, they're too cunning. We can't trust these guys because they plot and they're secret and they move things in secret and they're devious. So then he uses that to strip Tada estates from the Tada Genji. So it's almost completely accepted. It's almost the probability is highest that Genji Yoritomo betrayed Genji Yoshitsune because he just wanted to remove him from the chessboard. He didn't want Yoshitsune to ever potentially challenge his authority or challenge his power, and that is because everybody knew Yoshitsune was the hero of the Genpei War. And so Yoritomo needed to get him gone as soon as possible. As soon as the war was over, he needed to just make Yoshitsune disappear. And of course, he hid that behind his accusations. Oh, he's a war criminal. He needs to be executed, etc., etc. But pretty much every historian agrees that it was just because he wanted to make sure that he never would potentially rise up against him. And pretty much the same thing is the deal with the Tada Genji. Most historians pretty much all agree that Yoritomo simply wanted the Tada estates for himself. And so, you can't really, this is the Tada estates, it belongs to the Tada Genji. Well, what you do is you get the Tada Genji booted off the Tada estates, and you do that under the guise that you can't trust them. And the Tada Genji had a reputation for being conspirators, had a reputation for being clandestine samurai. So the accusations of being untrustworthy were incredibly easy to level at the Tada Genji. But the great irony, of course, is the actual untrusty person was Yoritomo. So now let's backtrack a little bit back to the ideological differences. So we've looked at the genealogical differences, we've looked at the political differences. Hopefully you can now understand the difference between, say, for example, Tada Genji and Kawachi Genji, genealogically and politically. And also, ideologically, those who really follow the Oe family's teachings, which would be like the Kawachi Genji, and then those who studied it but rejected the anti-Chinese stuff, like the Tada Genji. Now let's go back to that ideological difference. There are significant details within the Jingunden, aka the Oboshiden, as well as items from the Jimmu no Maki, which you can say the third chapter of the Nihon Shoki, the Jimmu no Maki. These items support the Tada Genji's pro-espionage, pro-clandestine, pro-strategic approach, and they actually go against the Oe family's claim that clandestine actions are anti-Japanese and not in accordance with history. So very interesting, I think, that in the Nihon Shoki, in the Jimmu no Maki, in the Jingunden, in the Oboshiden, etc., are supporting factors for supporting espionage, for supporting clandestine activities, for supporting strategic approach. And coming from the Jimmu no Maki and coming from the Nihon Shoki, it actually predates the Oe family's tradition and claim, which would be late 800s and the 900s. So with the Oe family actually sort of displaying this idea of this pre-state, sort of superstitious, magically based, shamanistic warrior kind of idea where you only need magic and bravery to win battles, is actually not what you find in the Nihon Shoki, not what you find in the Jimmu no Maki. So the Tada Genji, interestingly enough, by rejecting that aspect of the Oe training and sticking with the Chinese aspect of being pro-strategic planning, pro-clandestine behaviors, they are actually being more traditional than the Oe family, because they are actually matching what you find in the Jimmu no Maki, matching what you find in the Nihon Shoki. So, in other words, the Tada Genji are actually more in line with Emperor Jimmu's military methods. Alright, and that basically closes this video out, but if you've made it this far, please stick around just a little longer because I want to basically go through what we have on the screen here. So, this video is been produced in July of 2023, and so at this point in time, this is news. In the future, this will be old news, but I want to let the viewers know that I'm currently putting together an introduction level book for this Tada Genji, Kusunoki, Jingunden, Oboshiden, etc., etc., etc. All of this material we're talking about, this samurai traditions of the Tada Genji, this introduction level book is what I'm putting together right now, and it's about 85% done as of me releasing this video. It's a rough estimate. You know, it may end up taking a little longer, but it is a huge chunk of the book's already done. So now the book is basically it's basically what we cover on this channel. But I wanted to release a book as an alternative or complementary medium for people to gain access to this material. So all these videos that I create are to introduce you, the viewer, to these topics, to these ideas. You know, give you a bunch of introductions, show you how to link them together, and then keep producing videos. You can go off and research it yourself as well, etc., etc. But everything is these YouTube videos. So this is going to be a book. So this is going to be an alternate access point for people. And if people want to, they can watch the videos and get the book. And if you don't want to get the book, that's fine, because I'm still going to create the videos and you can just keep watching the video. So if you're interested in a copy of the book, just stay tuned and I'll inform you of when it releases. Purchase of the book is by no means mandatory. As I said, it's just an alternate approach to this material. All right, and with that, thank you. And you can, if you have any questions, concerns, whatever, just leave it in the comments.